Did you know Britain is the reason why Palestine is occupied today? A major problem with the Muslim community is that we belittle history. Palestine has been occupied for over a century, but how much knowledge do we have about these 100 years? In 2014, when Israel attacked Gaza, I felt sad watching the bombing. In response, I did few boycotts, which I'm committed to a date, but it's a shame that I didn't seek to learn anything serious about the conflict back then. All I had was sympathy for the Palestinians, but sympathy does not educate us. It will only keep us behind and the opposition ahead of us. But it's never too late to learn, so I decided to share my knowledge with you so you are better equipped than I was back in 2014. Today's video is based on the first chapter of this amazing book, The 100 Years War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi, a very concise and clear book, and I would say a must for any Palestinian supporter. Before I continue, I would like to say if you do find my content beneficial, then do consider to subscribe and like, as that will help the channel grow. Jazakumullahu khairan. So let's travel together back in time to World War I. There's intense fighting taking place between the Ottoman and the British in Palestine. Eventually the British won and the Ottomans were defeated. The Palestinians found themselves under foreign occupation. Thereafter, the most dangerous statement was announced, which changed the future of Palestine, and only God knows till how long. On 2nd of November 1917, the British Cabinet announced the Balfour Declaration, named after the British Secretary of State of Foreign Affairs, Arthur James Balfour. I printed out the Balfour Declaration. This one paragraph here changed the lives of the Palestinians for the worse. And guess what? The whole world heard the declaration before the Palestinians did. It declared the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. The Arabs were the majority. They were 94% of the population. Yet they were not mentioned even once as Arabs or Palestinians. Instead, they were referred to as the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Did you know the Muslim population in Britain is 6.5%? Now just imagine, if we had the right to establish an internationally recognized government in Britain and we had control over the state apparatus and resources, yet the white British people didn't have these rights, wouldn't that be the height of injustice? As if the Balfour Declaration wasn't enough, in 1922 the League of Nations issued its mandate for Palestine. I printed a copy of this as well, and it's awful. The mandate amplified its support for Zionism. According to this mandate, only Jewish people were to be recognized with national rights. No national or political rights were mentioned for the Palestinians at all. In fact, just like the Balfour Declaration, the word Arab or Palestinian wasn't mentioned. So practically, what were the implications? The mandatory government of Palestine belonged to Britain. Within this system, the minority Zionists were allowed to have autonomy. They were allowed to have self-governing institutions like the Jewish Agency. The Palestinians were obviously not allowed to have any form of autonomy. They were not allowed to have any institutions that would politically represent them. That means whenever the Palestinian leaders would negotiate with the British, it was never considered an official meeting. It was only a private meeting. In any international meeting, the Jewish Agency was recognized. They could put forward their case, their propaganda, and they were listened to. As for the Palestinians, if they had no official national representatives, then how could they have international recognition? No one would listen to them. And when you are not heard by anyone, it's as though you don't exist. The Jewish Agency had access and control over education, health, trade, financial resources, which obviously the Palestinians didn't have. And guess what? The minority Zionists, the Jewish Agency, made Hebrew the official language of Palestine. The only thing they didn't have at that time was a military force. Later on, when they acquired that, they became a complete sovereign state. Apart from giving the minority Jews power over the Arab majority, the mandate facilitated and encouraged Jewish migration to Palestine. See, to convert Palestine into a Jewish land, the demographics had to change. That meant more Jewish immigration to Palestine, and Article 7 of the mandate gave them Palestinian citizenship. Conversely, the Palestinians who had migrated during the Ottoman era and wanted to return back to Palestine, they were denied the right of return. So Britain was the first to deny the right of return to Palestinians and the Zionists follow them thereafter. Initially, the Jewish migration to Palestine was slow. The catalyst which drastically increased the population was in 1933 when the Nazis started to persecute the Jews. Palestinians felt scared they were going to lose their land, their rights, their freedom, their identity, and they were not even allowed to protest. Whenever they did, they were dispersed or sometimes killed by the British forces. All of this eventually led to the Palestinian revolt from 1936 to 1939. To suppress the revolt, they supplied arms and trained the Zionist terrorists. This war against the Palestinian resistance killed, injured, imprisoned, and exiled 10% of the adult male Arab population. During the revolt, it was the British who used Palestinian prisoners as human shields. They would tie them in front of their armored cars to avoid any attack from the Palestinian resistance forces, and the Zionists have obviously carried on this British legacy. Furthermore, the British set another example for the Zionists to follow. They demolished the homes of those who were considered to be rebels, presumed to be rebels, or even their relatives. And guess who the British had first tried these tactics of demolishing homes and using people as human shields? Yes, they had tried it on the Irish people, and then they tried it on the Palestinians, and the Zionists have carried on ever since. As if all of this wasn't enough, Palestinians were detained without a trial, and their leaders were in exile. Exactly the same happens to date. A major problem with the Palestinians was their lack of unity. All the Palestinian factions had the same goal against the British and the Zionists. Yet the inter-Palestinian conflict somewhat transformed this entire revolt into a civil war, where different factions were busy fighting each other and killing each other. Their disunity led to defeat, and at the end of the revolt, Palestinians were weaker than before, and the Zionists were stronger. It was only when World War II was drawing near that British needed Arab and Indian support, so they issued a white paper according to which they restricted Jewish migration to Palestine. The Zionists were furious. Those Zionist terrorists, armed and trained by the British, then began to attack them. They began to assassinate their officials. They blew the British headquarters, the King David Hotel, where there was a loss of 99 people. After World War II, British found it difficult to control the terrorist Zionists, and they decided to leave Palestine. The Nakba began whilst the British were still in Palestine, and they did nothing about it. 3 decades of British control made Palestinians stateless. The mandate formally ended on 29th of April 1948. Thereafter, the British handed over the issue of Palestine to the newly created United Nations. Maybe we can talk about the United Nations another time. Assalamu alaikum.